Hello, and welcome to Navigating to Success. I'm Focal Point Certified Business and Executive Coach Jeff Carlton, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Lowell Hochhalter, who is part of the LifeGuard Group, the CEO and founder of the LifeGuard Group. Welcome, Lowell.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is certainly a little bit different than the normal business that I get on, so this ought to be really a lot of fun. Tell me about the LifeGuard Group and what you do.
So, the LifeGuard Group is a group of individuals that we have put together. We like to call them experts. We may not be there, but that's what we're working towards to combat human trafficking in small rural communities, bringing prevention, awareness, rescue, and then the restoration of those who've been victimized.
Wow, I mean, it's hard not to get behind that. That's a pretty noble cause. So how big are you now?
Well, we have, as far as full-time staff, which it still boggles my mind to think, we're only 6 years old as an organization, and we have seven full-time staff.
Wow.
And when we started, it was just me. And my wife I always say she had a real job to support the habit of starting a nonprofit. And, but now we're up to seven full-time staff, and it's exciting to watch. People get behind us, and the staff that we have, I can't think of any better people to have than what we've put together.
Wow. Been 6 years, so you've been adding a person a year. Um, that's fantastic. Now, seven full-time, an upstart nonprofit, and you're in Stevensville, outside of Missoula, right?
Right. That's correct.
Okay. So, man, ton of questions are popping up into my head. Um, so what got you started? What was the driver behind this?
Well, I was in my previous career, I was traveling the country and even overseas doing school assembly programs, just motivational, character-based school assemblies, challenging students that there's more in front of them than there is behind them, and things are always brighter tomorrow. And I had a trip that took me over to India to do school assemblies, which I would have never thought in my lifetime that would have happened. And while I was there, there was a group of individuals who actually had brought me there and hosted me. And one night after the assemblies were all over, people think traveling is and working is glamorous, but it's actually very lonely when you travel,
Can
um,
be.
because you're right. You're in the. It's nice during the day. You're around the people. You're doing what you're there to do. But then in the evenings, it's usually just you, and either you call in room service or grab a pizza. And these guys said to me one evening, they said, "Hey, would you like to go out with us tonight?" And I mean, I jumped at the chance. I,
Sure.
in my perception, in my mind, I was thinking we're going to go and see the town, learn what India is about, eat some great food. And they picked me up, and it was a little odd because they picked me up in a big white van, which in India was completely out of place. Either you have a very small, tiny little car, or you have a big work truck,
Right.
like a dump truck. And so we started to head down one of the main roads, and pretty soon we pulled over, and one of the guy in the passenger seat, jumped out, slid the door open on the van, and not grabbed, but took the lady that was standing there on the street, brought her into the van, and I was a little taken aback. And we went a little while longer. They pulled over a couple of children, and by the time it was all said and done, the van was completely full. And being and this is sarcastic, being the extrovert that I am, I found myself now at the very back seat of this van, 15 passenger van, in the far corner, completely isolated from the two guys that I could even communicate with. And this van was now full, and we drove out to this, what we would call the country, a little bit more isolated. And they opened the door and these folks got out, and there were a lot of people mingling around. And I finally got with these two gentlemen and nobody in earshot. And I said, "Hey, can you please fill me in on what is happening?" And they said, "Well, these are trafficking victims, and this is a safe house, and this is where they're coming to get restored." And I said, "A little heads up might have been fantastic."
So much for
But that
dinner and
night,
drinks.
yeah. And that night, we filled that van 4 times. And
Wow.
um, I was there for 3 more days and then traveled home. And I couldn't get those thoughts, the faces of those people out of my brain fast enough. It was horrifying to me. It's where I was introduced to this world called human trafficking. And I couldn't escape those thoughts fast enough. And it was about 2 years later, one of these guys called me and he said, "I'm coming back to the US and I'd like you to join me in putting together an anti-trafficking group in the United States." And I said, "Absolutely not. I want nothing to do with that world. It's scary, horrifying. I still am dealing with it." And it took
Right.
3 years, but he talked me into it. And here we've been, now we're almost 16 years later.
Wow. That's yeah, I saw that you had been running for quite a while. So tell me about the geographic region that you serve with LifeGuard Group.
Well, when we first started, we were involved um, with an organization that was focused on the entire United States. And so we were working a lot of major events, mostly on the rescue and recovery side. So we were working Super Bowls, major conventions, anywhere there was a population influx for a period of time, we would travel there, of course, do our intel before, know what we were looking for, and then we would work those events. And during that time, realized that the individuals that we were finding and recovering, that's where they ended up, but it's not where they were from. But because they were from towns and communities like I grew up in eastern Montana, small little communities.
Sure.
And when, we were with them for about 11 years and then decided, who's working the front side of this? Who's bringing the prevention? How can we stop this before it starts? And so we're based in Montana. We do work in a lot of states across the United States, putting together teams. We call them quick response teams, especially for missing and runaway kids. And so right now we're based in Montana, which is my home, and it's expanding some days, I think, quicker than I would like it to, because it feels like some days it's pushing me farther than my capability can keep up with.
No, and that's pretty fast growth that you are experiencing right now. So, ton of other questions, a lot of layers to this onion. Tell me about the partnerships and the other groups that like law enforcement. Who do you work with on the outside to get this intel and what actions?
So we work with law enforcement very closely. And unfortunately, there's this really a misconception out there that law enforcement's going to solve this problem. And, we're talking about numbers that when you learn them, you realize how impossible that feat would actually be. In the world today, we're looking at 50.2 million victims. In the United States, anywhere between estimated numbers between 2.5 to 3 million. With, and not to be political in any way, but with the border crisis that we're dealing with right now and the influx of people coming into our country, especially children, we have seen the numbers rise like dramatically. So there's just no way law enforcement could do this by themselves. And so we want to come alongside them. Obviously, they deal with the bad guy and the bad people that are the perpetrators, the pimps, the traffickers. But there's got to be something that in place to deal with those who have been victimized. There's a lot of great other NGOs like us, non-government organizations that
Yeah.
we partner with and we want to partner with. And so that's a big part of what we do, is building those collaborations and putting those things together to weave this net that's so tight that a victim just cannot fall through.
Well, that's impressive. Um, so gosh, I don't know whether to talk about the prevention piece or the rescue and recovery piece, because as an NGO, and you're not law enforcement. At what point can you and how do you take action? I mean, how do you pull off, say, a rescue?
Well, there's oftentimes I think back to that trip to India, and I wish we could do what they did. Just drive down the street, take these victims and get them to a safe place. Um, we used to say, you know, even to victims, when we would find them, we would make a statement like, we just want to get you back home. But now that's not what we say. And we dare not say that, because more often than not, we're finding that home or family is where it begins, unfortunately.
Interesting.
And so for a victim to hear you say, we're just going to get you back home, they want nothing to do with their perception of home.
Sure.
And so, when we will either get a call from a family member asking us to find their child or their loved one, and we have in place, some tools that are available to the general public, and we've just learned to use them to the best of our advantage. There's some softwares and things out there, facial recognition stuff that we can use online, but we want to serve these families, but not just to help find the missing or the runaway, but also to walk alongside them during that process, because they are in that place
Yeah.
of being victimized too. So in a way, we kind of have a chaplain relationship with them to help them through the process while their loved one's gone. And hopefully, of course, every time we do a rescue, recovery, the goal is to find them standing, breathing,
Yeah.
victimized, yes, but at least alive.
Yeah. And it's amazing what people can bounce back from. Human beings are a lot
Yep.
more resilient than we sometimes know ourselves, I think, a lot of times. Um, One question that kind of really jumped out at me is, where does the money come from? How do you fund Lifeguard Group?
So we're all privately funded. Those that give on a monthly basis believe in the cause, believe in our mission. We have some foundational grants that we've written for and received, and beyond that, there has been government funding that is out there from the state level, from the federal level, but oftentimes that funding costs more in time and personnel than it benefits. So
Interesting.
there's so many great private foundations out there, family foundations and what have you, and but really the power comes from the individual donors that jump behind this. $25 a month, $50 a month. I know I've had plenty of donors say, all I can do is $25 a month, and I go, you have no idea what that can do for us. You have no idea the power behind that $25. We spoke to a group of youth, and this was years ago, and we talked about the average age of entry into the life of trafficking is 12 to 13 years old, 12 years old for a girl, 13 for a boy. And this one young man came up and he says, I want to give $13 a month because of what you guys said. And he has done that for, it's got to be 10 to 12 years now.
Wow.
But I'll tell you what that does is, when you spend money, you think about that. Now a kid, now a man, that is willing to give his money to see a purpose fulfilled. It makes you think twice when you write a check or when you spend that money.
Yeah. Um, no, that's great. Um, Inspiring. So, last question, what do you see yourself looking like in 2 to 3 years?
A lot of big dreams, and I'm glad I'm in this room without our board of directors because when we formed the LifeGuard Group, we were in motion for about 2 years, and I sat in our board meeting and I said we need to build a rescue and safe house and a restoration home. And our board looked at me and just like, what do we're so young. But the need was so massive. Like in the United States right now, there are only about 1,200 to 1,500 beds available for victims who are ready to get out of the life and who are rescued. And so we started on that process. And since that time, we purchased a 40-acre piece of property that was once used as an outfitter's resort. And we have done a lot of renovations and remodeling. And so we have a safe house here in Western Montana. But that 40 acres has a piece of land on it. And the dream is within the next 2 to 3 years is to build a home for rescued children. And, sometimes when I say that, I can feel the weight literally, almost physically rest on my shoulders, thinking about the costs and the work that will take. Everything else up to this point's been, the facilities have been built, and so we've just had to renovate and remodel. And so now this would be building from scratch. But I try to, when I think about the hard work and the toil that is to come, I think, my mind just goes back to the faces of the children and
Sure.
like,
That's cool.
we have no other option.
Yeah. Well, this has been quite an inspiring journey, Lowell. And my hat's off to you for the work that you and your team are doing, and everyone is doing, because this um, combating human trafficking is a noble cause, and it is a real problem, and it's only getting worse.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you're doing. Any parting
Thank you.
shots before we sign off?
Well, one of the questions that you sent me as we put together the plan to do this together, what would be one thing that I would leave with somebody that's thinking about, starting an organization or starting a business or an entrepreneur. And the one thought that I could leave is, be driven by your passion. It's amazing how far your passion will carry you. Even when the bank account looks low, the doubters seem to get louder and louder. Your passion will scream louder than any doubter can ever speak to you. And it's amazing what passion can do. And I think in our current society, if we could see more passion in each of us, we could see a lot of things get done real fast.
Yeah, many hands.
Yeah.
Wise words, sir. Thank you again for joining me. And for everybody who's watching, thanks for exploring this business journey. This was quite an interesting episode. Everybody take care. Thank you, Lowell.
Thank you.